The Rockfall incident. It starts as a simple outdoor ascent in a rugged mountain region, the kind of place where hikers come for views, not danger. Hamza, Benhilal, and his group are moving along a rocky path that has been used countless times before. Nothing about the environment suggests what's about to happen. The footage shows a calm pace at first, careful steps, light conversation, and a steady climb. The terrain is uneven but familiar, the kind of risk experienced hikers usually manage without issue. But mountains don't stay predictable for long. Without warning, a section of the rock face begins to shift. At first, it's subtle, small debris breaking loose, almost easy to ignore. Then, the movement grows. Stones start falling faster, followed by heavier fragments breaking away from above the group's position. Within seconds, the situation escalates from a hike to an emergency escape. The group tries to move downhill, but the slope that once felt stable is now unstable underfoot. Every step becomes a risk. Hamza is caught in a position where retreat and forward movement both become dangerous. The camera captures fragments of confusion, rapid movement, and the sudden collapse of the environment around them. What makes the moment so intense isn't just the rockfall itself, it's how quickly everything changes. There's no buildup, no clear warning, just a complete shift from safety to survival. In the aftermath, visibility becomes unclear as dust and debris fill the air. The group is separated, and communication breaks down. Rescue efforts are later launched, but the terrain makes access extremely difficult, delaying any immediate response. When the situation is finally assessed, it becomes clear how fast nature took control and how little time anyone had to react once it started. And this is only the first event, because the next incident doesn't come from falling rock or shifting terrain. Before we start the next chapter, please subscribe and help me reach 1,000 subscribers. Once we reach 1,000 subscribers, we can make part 2 of this video. Your support means a lot. This next event takes place on one of the most intimidating natural structures in the world, El Capitan in Yosemite National Park. A vertical granite wall that has become a symbol of extreme climbing culture, where every movement is measured and every mistake is amplified by distance. The footage comes from a live climb setup, where climbers and viewers are watching progress in real time. At first, everything appears controlled. The climber is positioned on a familiar route, moving carefully between holds that have been used in countless ascents before. There's a rhythm to it. Climb, secure, adjust, repeat. Nothing suggests urgency. Nothing suggests danger beyond the expected risks of the sport. But El Capitan is known for one simple truth: conditions never stay the same. A moment of instability changes everything. A grip fails, or a placement shifts just slightly, enough to break the chain of control. What follows isn't a slow collapse, but a sudden loss of stability at extreme height, where there is no margin for recovery, because at that altitude, there is no ground-level correction. No safety net that can fully compensate for momentum once it starts. The live feed captures the shift instantly. Viewers go from watching a steady climb to witnessing a situation unfold that can no longer be reversed. More impactful is how fast it happens. One moment there is progress, and the next, the entire climb becomes a fight against gravity itself. Rescue teams later respond, but the environment itself becomes part of the challenge. Vertical terrain, limited access, and distance all combine to slow every attempt at intervention. And when the situation is reviewed afterward, one thing becomes clear. It wasn't a long sequence of errors. It was one single moment that ended the line. And from here, the next incident moves away from mountains entirely, but on the unpredictability of something far more aggressive in the wild. Horatio Chapple Bear Camp Attack. This incident takes place far above the Arctic Circle, in one of the most remote and unforgiving environments on Earth. A scientific expedition group has set up a temporary camp in an isolated region where human presence is rare and wildlife dominates the landscape completely. Among the team is Horatio Chapple, a young participant involved in the expedition. The camp is structured with basic safety measures in place: food storage rules, perimeter awareness, and designated watch rotations. Everything is designed around one assumption: that distance alone is enough protection. But in the Arctic, that assumption never lasts long. During the night, movement is detected near the perimeter of the camp. At first, it's dismissed as normal wildlife activity, something the group has prepared for in theory, but never truly experienced in practice. The environment is silent, low visibility, and unpredictable. Then the situation escalates. A polar bear approaches the camp area, drawn by scent and opportunity. What was once a controlled scientific setting instantly becomes a survival scenario. The group attempts to react, but the speed of the situation leaves very little room for coordination. Horatio is caught in the most exposed part of the camp layout, where distance and terrain offer almost no protection. The response from others is immediate but chaotic, as the environment itself becomes part of the threat. What makes this event so significant is how quickly the boundary between observation and survival disappears. The expedition was there to study nature, but suddenly, they are inside it in the most dangerous way possible. Rescue protocols are activated, but the remoteness of the location makes immediate response extremely difficult. Every minute matters, and every delay becomes critical in conditions where survival windows are extremely narrow. In the aftermath, the expedition becomes a case study in how even well-prepared groups can be overwhelmed when unpredictability enters a controlled environment. And this is still only the middle of the story, because the next incident doesn't happen in the frozen silence of the Arctic. This case takes place in Montana, far from any major city, where open land stretches for miles and the nearest help can be hours away. It begins in a seemingly normal camping environment, a shared outdoor site where travelers and locals occasionally cross paths in search of isolation, nature, and quiet. At first, everything appears harmless. People are setting up tents, preparing food, and settling into what feels like a peaceful overnight stay. There's a sense of routine comfort, the kind that comes from believing you're far enough away from anything dangerous. But isolation changes how situations unfold. A stranger enters the environment, initially appearing unthreatening. In remote places like this, hospitality is common. Strangers are often treated with trust, simply because there are no visible reasons not to. Conversations begin, interactions feel normal, and nothing immediately suggests danger. That comfort is what makes the shift so sudden. Without warning, the situation escalates from casual interaction into a confrontation that no one is prepared for. The open space of the campsite, which once felt safe, now becomes exposed terrain with no real barriers or protection. Every direction is visible, but nowhere offers cover. What follows is a chaotic breakdown of control, people attempting to separate, move, or react while still trying to understand what triggered the change. In remote environments, there is no quick escape route, and every decision becomes amplified by distance and delay. Emergency response is eventually called, but the time gap between the incident and help arriving becomes a critical factor in how events unfold. Investigators later reconstruct the sequence, focusing heavily on how quickly trust turned into vulnerability in an isolated setting. The key takeaway from the case is not just what happened, but where it happened, a place where safety is assumed, not guaranteed. And this pattern continues, because the next incident moves from open wilderness into something even more deceptive. This incident takes place in Iceland, inside one of the country's most visually striking but unstable natural formations, a glacier ice cave system that attracts guided tours from all over the world. On the surface, it looks almost unreal. Deep blue walls, frozen layers of compressed ice, and narrow tunnels shaped by centuries of shifting temperatures. Visitors enter in small groups, led by experienced guides who understand the terrain and its limitations. At first, everything feels controlled. The ice is solid, the paths are marked, and the environment appears stable enough for exploration. But glaciers are never truly still. Inside the cave system, subtle changes are already happening. Temperature shifts, internal melting, and structural stress slowly weaken sections of ice that look perfectly solid from the outside. These changes are invisible to visitors moving through the system in real time. The group continues deeper into the cave, unaware that parts of the structure above them are becoming unstable. Then, without clear warning, the environment begins to fail. A section of ice shifts overhead, first small cracks, then sudden structural movement. The sound inside the cave changes instantly, turning from quiet echo to sharp breaking fractures. The guide reacts immediately, but the space is too confined for fast evacuation. What makes ice cave collapses so dangerous is the combination of weight, speed, and confinement. When sections break, they don't fall slowly. They crash into enclosed spaces where there is nowhere to disperse force safely. The group attempts to retreat, but visibility and footing become compromised as debris fills the tunnel. Communication becomes difficult, and movement slows as conditions deteriorate rapidly. Rescue teams later face the challenge of accessing a shifting structure that continues to change even after the initial collapse. Every attempt at entry carries risk because the environment is still unstable. In the aftermath, the cave is partially sealed off, with experts confirming that the collapse was part of a larger natural cycle that could not have been fully predicted in real time. And this leads into the next case. Because the next incident doesn't involve ice, cliffs, or isolated wilderness, it involves something far more volatile. Chapter 6. The Volcano Devil's Flow Event. This next case takes place near an active volcanic region, where researchers and extreme environment photographers gather to document one of nature's most unpredictable forces. The goal is simple in theory: observe, record, and retreat before conditions change. But volcanoes don't follow schedules. At first, the environment shows only subtle warning signs. Steam vents intensify, distant rumbling increases, and small seismic shifts begin to register in monitoring equipment. To trained observers, these signals suggest movement beneath the surface, but not yet an immediate eruption. That assessment changes quickly. Without a clear, visible trigger, the volcano enters a violent phase of activity. What begins as pressure release escalates into a pyroclastic flow, a fast-moving current of hot gas, ash, and volcanic debris that moves faster than most people can realistically outrun once it begins. The group attempts to evacuate the area, but terrain and distance work against them. Paths that were accessible earlier become unusable within minutes, as visibility drops and air quality deteriorates rapidly. Unlike lava flows, pyroclastic currents are not something you can navigate or outmaneuver. They move unpredictably, following valleys and collapsing over terrain with overwhelming speed and temperature. The footage captured during this event becomes one of the most studied examples of how quickly volcanic environments can shift from stable observation points into life-threatening zones. What makes this case even more significant is that some of the individuals involved were not casual visitors. They were experienced researchers who understood the risks better than most. Yet even with preparation, the scale and speed of the event exceeded expectations. Emergency response teams later described the aftermath as one of the most inaccessible disaster zones they have ever encountered, with terrain completely reshaped by volcanic activity. In the end, The event becomes a reference point for how little control humans actually have once a volcano reaches this stage of eruption. And this brings us to the final incident. This final incident returns to El Capitan in Yosemite, the same massive granite wall known for pushing climbers and extreme athletes to their limits. But this time, the focus isn't climbing, it's base jumping, and more specifically, a protest-style jump meant to challenge restrictions around extreme sports in protected areas. The setup begins with experienced jumpers preparing at height, carefully organizing gear and coordinating timing. On the surface, it appears controlled. Every movement is rehearsed. Every step is based on muscle memory built from years of repetition. That's exactly where the title becomes important. Muscle memory is what allows professionals to perform under pressure without hesitation. But in extreme environments, it can also become dangerous when conditions don't match expectation. As the jumper reaches the edge, everything depends on a sequence that has likely been performed many times before. Positioning, timing, release, but something breaks that sequence. Whether it's a last-second adjustment, equipment misalignment, or a misread of environmental conditions, the jump does not unfold exactly as trained. In base jumping, there is no margin for correction once commitment begins. Gravity takes over instantly. The footage captures the immediate transition from preparation to freefall, where control is no longer possible and every variable becomes permanent in seconds. What makes this incident stand out is not just the jump itself, but the contrast between experience and outcome. How repetition and confidence can still be overridden by a single unexpected factor at height. Emergency response is already irrelevant at the moment of impact. The terrain below offers no easy access, and recovery becomes a technical operation in one of the most difficult climbing environments in North America. In the aftermath, the event is widely discussed in extreme sports communities as another example of how familiarity with danger does not eliminate it, it only changes how it is approached. And as the final chapter closes, the pattern across all these disasters becomes clear. Different environments, different people, different choices, but the same outcome every time. A moment where control disappears and the environment takes over completely.